My name is Todd Siefker. I'm a grad student at Morningside College. I'm also a Spanish teacher in the Sioux City Community School District. This study took place in the fall semester of 2018. The title of my study is Building Foreign Language Proficiency and Self-Efficacy at the Secondary Level via Self-Reflection. Foreign language in the United States falls woefully behind the rest of the world. While 94% of U.S. Students are exposed to foreign language, less than 1% of the students who graduate are actually bilingual due to their experience in school. Compare that to Europe, where 77% of students who come out of school are not only bilingual, but many are multilingual. What has resulted in that is that it has, studies show that it has collectively affected our sense of self-efficacy in the United States. We don't see people who are bilingual coming out of school. We don't expect to be bilingual coming out of school, so it has affected our mindset as well. The reason for this study is to take on this attitude that if we don't invest in K through 12 education, that we'll never have any sort of results like the Europeans. While there may be some truth to that, this study asks a different question. What can we do given the 9 through 12 system that most of the parts of the country have? What can we do to foster higher linguistic proficiency? Technology is often looked at as the linguistic panacea to close the proficiency gap with the rest of the world. In the last 20 years, this has not happened. This study looks at what internal tools and resources do we have in terms of mindset as we approach language, and how can we use that to become better language learners. The world is going to demand more linguistic skill. To be linguistically relevant in the 21st century is going to be important for networking, for making more income, for finding better jobs, and also for improving mental elasticity to solve novel problems, as well as to increase IQ. Marion Shook happens when you use circumlocution, which all language learners use, which is basically to use little words to get to a big word that you don't know. Also, being bilingual may reduce the likelihood of developing Alzheimer's, according to Alvin Gonzalez and Ortega Campo Verde. So the current foreign language model is not working. We need something that is inexpensive, practical, and empowering. When we look at self-reflection throughout literature, we find that it has been studied across all age groups and in all subject areas. From kindergarten, it has been found by Mata and Jarvala in 2013 to have a positive impact on academic achievement, as well as with math students in Radness and Zimmerman's 2008 study of the middle school students. It has also been found to increase language proficiency in Iranian students in a study done in 2014 there. It has also been used in college and studied the exact same parameters that are in this study, and all were found to increase academic performance. There was a study done in Colombia with adults that, with language learners, that suggested that reflection would help proficiency, but that said that the findings were not conclusive. And so this study fills a gap in research that, while there has been many studies done with how self-reflection addresses or affects things like math and science and different areas, there is not much out there when it comes to foreign language. The underpinnings for this study definitely rest on reflection, which is a part of Kolb's experiential learning theory. Also, the self-efficacy part rests on the theoretical framework of Albert Bandura's social cognitive theory, which basically says that self-efficacy, the belief that you can do it, actually affects the outcome and the performance. To go one step further, his reciprocal causation theory said that not only does self-efficacy help you perform better, but the performance itself will also impact your self-efficacy in a spiral of impact and success or failure. Krashen's language acquisition theory, which is the kind of the ongoing theory behind much of language learning today, sort of leaves behind the old grammatical translation model where forms and isolation language learning is now replaced with more of a natural acquisition immersive model by Krashen. The purpose of this quantitative research was to determine self-reflection's impact on self-efficacy and self-language proficiency, and the hypothesis was that the students who engaged in the self-reflection questionnaire would have a higher linguistic proficiency and self-efficacy than the students who did not. The variables that used in this were the self-reflection questionnaire by Kimber et al. In 2000. It had a reliability score of 0.62 to 0.76 in Cronbach's alpha. The general self-efficacy scale by Schwarzer and Jerusalem's 1995 study had an internal reliability of Cronbach's alpha of 0.90, and the other dependent variable, the National Spanish Exam, had a 0.96 Cronbach's alpha of reliability. This study offers quantitative evidence for the impact that self-reflection has on language acquisition and self-efficacy. The study involved 109 high school foreign language students in the central parts of the United States. The average age was 17.3 years. There were 68 females, 41 males. In the experimental group, there were 58 participants and 51 participants in the control groups, and there you can also see the breakdown of gender. The racial demographic in the study was 79% Hispanic, 17% Caucasian, 2% African American, 2% Asian American. Both the control and experimental groups were essentially identical in the racial and economic makeup. The economic background was that 2/3 of the students in the school district came from a Title I low-income school and were eligible for free and reduced lunch. The materials used in this study were district-approved, district-issued laptops, the HP 840 and the Microsoft Surface Pro 3. The works of literature that we read to implement Krashen's model of immersion were Don Quixote, Cajas de Cartón, and Abriendo Pasos. The language management system that we used was Canvas, which tied in Microsoft Excel spreadsheets, which is what we took those assessment tools on the right that have already been mentioned. There were 3 levels of Spanish that were in the study. There was a Spanish 4 level, there was an AP Spanish language and an AP Spanish literature course. Each of those levels had a control and experimental group. So the breakdown of the whole situation was a 6-week study at every level of the Spanish. On the first week, they all had the National Spanish Exam and the General Self-Efficacy Scale. This experimental group started in on its self-reflection questionnaire, which it did every week for the next following 6 weeks. At the end, the post-test, there was another series of everybody taking the National Spanish Exam and the General Self-Efficacy Scale, and the last self-reflection questionnaire by the experimental group. The data analysis for the study was the independent samples t-test. At the start of the study, there was no significant differences between the experimental and the study group. The means were 67 start for the experimental and 66 for the control. Very similar. The stat that actually sticks out there is the p-value at 0.825, which tends to leave a lot of explanation to randomness, because the alpha was set at 0.05. Looking at the differences between the experimental group and the control group in terms of self-efficacy at the start of the study, they were all nearly identical. It's 3.03 for the experimental, 3.12 for the control group. But again, the p-value was higher than 0.05, which throws in a factor of randomness here. When we look at the scoring for the the control group is in gray, and you can see that the control group that did not have any self-reflection actually grew in proficiency, while the group that engaged in self-reflection, the experimental group in black, actually decreased. In terms of self-efficacy, the experimental group stayed exactly the same, and the gray control group from pre to post went down slightly. If we look at the means of the experimental group, you can see a decrease of 5 points, 67 to 62. The standard deviation in both the pre and the post tests are extremely high, and it leads one to believe that there was a lot of skill differentiation and a lot of variety of scores, extreme scores, outlier scores in this study. However, the self-efficacy scores were very similar from pre to post test, exactly similar, and the standard deviation was very low. So the scores were very similar. The control group actually grew in terms of its mean in the National Spanish exam, but slightly decreased in its means in the self-efficacy. Again, the standard deviation in the National Spanish exam for the control group was high, showing once again that there was lots of variability in scores. The overall p-value in these tests exceeded the alpha level that was set at 0.05. Therefore, the results demonstrated a high tendency toward randomness as an explanation for these results. Therefore, the results of this study, that the National Spanish exam indicated that the experimental group did not perform better than the control group. You can see the stats there that have already been explained. Also, the self-efficacy scores from the experimental group were not higher than the scores of the control group. Therefore, the findings of this study from these t-tests suggest that this did not support this hypothesis that self-reflection would improve linguistic self-efficacy and language proficiency. This research seemingly suggests that self-reflection has negligible impact on language proficiency growth or self-efficacy. However, there is a large body of evidence to suggest otherwise. This study is in no way a definitive conclusion on this topic. There are some implications from this study, though. One shows that Kolb's experiential learning theory is a continuum, and as this study took reflection as one component of the continuum out, it shows that Kolb's theory works as a four-piece puzzle, and this study only had one piece of the puzzle, which may attribute to some of the scores. Also, Bandura's reciprocal causation theory is sort of supported by this study, because as the proficiency levels didn't improve, neither did the self-efficacy scores, which would prove reciprocal causation. There was also just some good impact from establishing a system of self-reflection from the course that was outside of the scope of the study. The problems in this study were largely related to the meta-reflective tool, the self-reflection questionnaire, which was really a reflection about reflecting. And also, there may have been some test burnout from the experimental group. Suggestions for further study would be to tie the language learning skills or the reflection to the skills and the efficacy issues that you're trying to study, and also use a qualitative, more wide-open journal-type approach to reflection. And also, continued research on this topic is highly suggested by this author. These are the resources that were used in the course of this presentation.